Hi YouTube. I went back to England last week for my mother's funeral, and I wanted to talk to you about that because it feels a bit like another funeral when I've come back, because my cat is still missing, one of my cats, and so it's a kind of a somber mood. Funerals. I wanted to talk about funerals and what we go through, and if you should say something, because any kind of public speaking could lead to anxieties, and quite often if you've lost a parent, obviously it's the worst. We've all got a parent, and we're all going to lose a parent, right? So it's inevitable. You might not get married, you might not be a best man, you might not give away a daughter, but you will go to a funeral of a parent, and so people may feel that they want to say something, but it's too hard. And I was a bit like that. I felt like I wanted to do something, but it was hard. So I want to talk to you about that, about public speaking, and about specifically giving a eulogy at a funeral. So in my case, I've got a brother and I've got 3 sisters and lots of nephews, young nephews and nieces. And 2 of my sisters read a poem and 2 of my nieces read a poem. My brother wrote something and he read it, and I went last and did my part. Now, when you go to a modern funeral, that's in a crematorium, there's a time limit, and literally they're banging on the doors for the next group of people to come in. It's a big business. It's a growing business. If you wanted to get into a business, you could. The worst businesses you could get into, but that's another subject for another day. Probably never. But cancer rates and Princess Catherine coming out with her cancer diagnosis. Death is something that is more present than ever. And I don't know why. 5G, 6G, medical interventions, diet, failed care while the pandemic was going on. Who knows? But people are dying. So, my dear viewers and listeners, when you are faced with this situation of dealing with the death of a loved one, there's 2 ways of doing it. You can do nothing and just listen to everybody else, or you can do something. Now, when my father died in 1991, he was cremated, but we went to a church and we had a church service, and a clergyman came to my house. He died at home. He had cancer. He died at home. And it was quite quick, stomach cancer. He was told by the doctor it's terminal. 3 months later, after being given 3 months to live, he died at home. A man from the church came to the house, went through the service. Does anybody want to say anything? My sister and I, or me and my sister, were no. So nothing was said about my dad, because his sister, his friends, nobody said anything. After the church service, which was full of, church, in a church, hymns, beautiful hymns, and a man of the cloth talking about passing to the angels, etc., etc., he was cremated. I don't really remember exactly where, but it would have been a separate building. And then we went back to my dad's house, and some people had made food, some of our friends. My mum was there. My mum and dad had divorced, and his sister was there, and there was a bit of an atmosphere because his sister didn't like my mother particularly, and they had a bit of a falling out. But just prior to them falling out, which was really over really quickly, like my aunt said, I didn't hear her say it, but something like, "What? I can't believe you got a nerve to show up." And my mum just basically left the room in tears and went upstairs and cried for a bit. And I asked my aunt to leave. But a minute or two before that, somebody said, "Jim, he's going to say a few words. So he didn't say he was going to say that, and I wasn't prepared for it. So my few words literally were that. It was, thank you all for coming, which was totally inadequate, and I felt really bad about it. I didn't thank the people that had made the food. Thank you for coming. I mean, so, thanks to that guy for springing that on me without asking me. But, I feel like, I didn't feel like I let my dad down. My dad would be full of love and not worrying about things like that. But I wasn't prepared anyway. So 1991, 2024, 24 plus 9, 33 years later, when it came to lay my mum to rest, although she was cremated, I wanted to say something. And so what, as I was the oldest, what I did was I wrote about her life from my perspective as I knew it. And I'd written this, and it was a bit tricky because I've got half brothers and sisters, and my mum was with 3 different people, and this is kind of like, you want to, if you're going to type something out, you want it in easy to read font, right? You don't want to be losing your place. Paragraph space, 1 page. This is Arial font, 2 pages, and a bit, right? And as I was, this is the final version. Sorry about all the noise. If you've got stepbrothers, then maybe will not want you to talk about something. You've got different sensitivities. So we get to a version everyone's happy with. And as I was flying out on EasyJet, which is again another story, because if you don't check the right baggage, they charged me 60 euros at the airport, took my bag off me, put it in the hold. So not only, because this cabin bag is the old wheelie bag that you could always in a day you've been able to put in the overhead lockers, right? Now they've changed the rules. A bit like, shrinkflation, right? In the old, you buy these anti-humidifier things to dry something out. It sort of dries things out, and I bought some yesterday. Packets now this big. Like before COVID, it was this big. So they've charged you the same price, but they give you 3 bags and a lot smaller. EasyJet, what's their answer? Well, we're going to say, so if you want speedy boarding, it's gone up to 30 quid or 30 euros to get 3D boarding, and that's the only way you can get on with your decent sized luggage. Otherwise, you've got to have a bag that can go under the seat. Well, nobody puts a bag under the seat. They put it in the overhead, and it's another kind of sneaky foot way of getting more money out of people. I mean, they do offer a good service. They've got a nice website. Half the money that you pay in fares goes to the government in taxes, so it's not particularly a beef at EasyJet. They've got to make the money, but the ground crew at Lyon took my. They told me as I was about to go through final gate and check in. At the departure gate, that bag's it won't fit in the basket. You've got to pay 60 euros, and then they put it in the hold. Anyway, I've forgotten what I was saying now, or where I was, which is always annoying. But I got over there, long flight, blah blah blah. You arrive and you've got to read something. Anyway, that's where I was. Yes, thank you. So the flight was traumatic. Okay, and I'm telling you that about the luggage because it was quite annoying. But when I got on the plane, and I was the last person to get on the plane, so I tried to stop them putting my bag in a hold and not being able to take it in the cabin because I'd got a speech in there, I'd got family photos in there. I thought, if the bag gets lost, then I thought, I can reprint out the speech. But I went back to get it and it was too late. And so I was the last person on the plane. I had a great seat. I had a window seat. I'm blind in this eye, so I was on the right side of the plane. I had a window seat. There was a space between me that was empty. And lady in the aisle seat. And we kind of shared the middle seat. And it was so foggy that we took off at 7 a.m. So it was kind of just about light. They told us to turn all our phones off. not just put it on air because of airplane mode, because they needed super radar or what have you. And we burst through the clouds, and it was a lovely flight. And suddenly I thought, hang on, don't just launch into what you're going to say a bit more. And it all worked out and came clear. But basically, I looked up a few things, going back to the subject of you and what you might want to do. I looked online about giving a eulogy, and it's like, 5, 10, 15 minutes maximum. Think of it as an opportunity. Think of it as an opportunity. And then the old one about look at the audience as if they are babies or what have you. But I mean, I just thought, well, it is an opportunity. As far as the length goes, and going back a bit to modern services, it is such a, I'm not going to say a cutthroat thing, but you really are, like I was told it's 40 minutes. And in fact, it was 30 minutes, and it was 40 minutes. We had 40 minutes. But what you're going to find, my dear viewers, is that going forward, there is such a we're going to have more deaths, possibly. And there's a thing now where you may feel more pressured into performing or doing something. And it's kind of like, it's really hard because I'll explain why. In the old days, you'd go to church. Now there are fewer and fewer church services, and more of these quick, get them in, next, crematorium type funerals. You're on a time limit, 40 minutes, and you don't have a vicar. So that has been replaced with a thing called a celebrant. I looked into it because I knew nothing about all this until my brother, who's done all the liaison in the UK with this kind of thing, informed me about this. And what the celebrant is, this whole thing is really geared to come forward, those with memories, those who want to speak, those who want to say something. So there's very much an emphasis on public speaking, which wasn't there in 1991. It didn't really exist like that, So another tip is have a shot of gin before you get up, right? So just before you get, me and the five of us, one of my sisters made us all a bottle of like plum schnapps, basically, and she gave us all our little bottles. That's a good tip, right? It just calms you and makes you feel better. Don't get pissed. Don't go overboard. You just have a couple of shots, and that's good. Obviously, it depends on the quality of what you've written. If you've written, try and like be humorous is what my thoughts were, and I succeeded in that. It went really well. Because everybody's so depressed, and everybody's expecting to hear more things that are depressing. But I mean, even though it's not a memorial service where you might expect to hear, stories about what happened in the past, and it's more lighthearted because that person died maybe 6 months prior. Even though it is a funeral, it doesn't mean that you can't be a bit lighthearted, and not all the time. It was a mixture, isn't it? But basically, my job here today is to tell you what I've been up to, what I've been through, and to share with you some idea of what you might expect, and the notion that there are more and more funerals taking place, and the new way of doing things, get them in, get them out, and these celebrants that encourage people to speak. I mean, if nobody speaks, then the celebrant will carry the whole thing. But it's very much an emphasis on getting people up to share memories, etc., etc. Now, talking about humour, if you're talking about, I was going to say this at the funeral, but I didn't, because one of the people coming has got cancer, so I didn't go into different types of deaths. But there are different. There are good deaths, and there are deaths that aren't so good. if you lose a child, if somebody's young, if that, Catherine of Wales, she's got 3 young children. If she dies, that's going to be worse than my mother, who was 80. So there's, different types of death. So what I say here, if anyone is affected by this, it's obviously different to you. But basically, it's an opportunity, and use Arial font, leave plenty of spaces, and have a shot before you go up. And look at it as an opportunity, which I think I've already said, right? So that was my experience. I've come back to the UK, and my cat is still missing. So today's Sunday. I came back on Thursday, and it's a real bastard, because he was my favourite cat. And I tell you, tomcats around here, they don't do very well. But I'll wrap it up there, and say thanks for listening, and catch you later.